Okay, so last time we showed you how to bottle wine not using a filter by polishing your wine to get rid of all of the sediment. This time we're going to show how to use a Buon Vino Minijet Filter, item number 5270. You can access it at the link below. And what this is going to do is we don't have to polish it. It'll get rid of all sediment. It doesn't affect the flavor or the color, but it'll just get rid of all the sediment you have in the bottles. And sediment doesn't really affect the flavor, but it's presentation. So we really want to make our wine crystal clear. So we're going to go ahead and get set up here right now. It's a pretty easy piece of equipment to use. We call it a toy. If you get a passion for making wine, spoil yourself and get a Minijet filter. You want to make sure all of the holes are lined up. If you have it backwards, these studs are offset and it won't be perpendicular. One side will be higher than the others. Same with the filter pads.
Yeah, they only fit one way.
Well, they fit both ways, but they should only fit one way.
Right.
Okay, so we want to soak our pads just enough to get them wet so you don't have any dry pockets. If you have dry pockets, then you're going to be using up the rest of the filter pad and you're not really going to be using that one.
You also don't want to waste your wine saturating your filter pads.
So we're going to soak it in water. Now you don't want to soak them too much or the filter pads will sponge out and you'll get air bubbles in your wine. And oxygen is our best friend when we're fermenting, but when we're done fermenting, it's our enemy. We really want to limit the amount of oxygen we have.
So you're putting a pad in between every one of those plates?
Yep, and all the holes line up just like the plastic pads. And you see they're all nice and level there.
This is one of the nice toys you can get when you get further into this and you actually want to go through extra steps because, as Matt said, presentation is a really important thing with your wine. It's important for it to smell right, for it to taste right, but it's also important that it looks right too, because the appearance of wine is just as important as everything else.
Now, the overflow pan here is going to be taking away all of the stuff that would have been giving you sediment. Some people will refilter that. Most of us just drink it and not worry about that little bit of loss. Now, the one nice tip on this is the tighter you can get these toggles on here, the better. And I'll do the beginning, you just finish the end for me there. The tighter you get them, the less overflow you're going to have because it won't be escaping in between the sets of filter pads. Now, these little doilies work really nice on getting some extra turn.
Yeah, you get that extra grip on there.
And you always want to make sure you tighten these down before you put your hoses on, because the hoses get in the way of tightening them.
You can get a lot more out of that, probably another full turn or two. Really good grip. I'm gonna remove this, okay?
Yes, that'd be great, thank you. All right, so we're ready to set up the hoses. Now the long hose that's the bigger size is going to go down into our bottling bucket, and that goes on the discharge side of the filter housing.
And you don't need any kind of a clip for that, do you? No, it holds well.
The shorter, skinnier one is our overflow. That's going to go down into our overflow bucket here. Always make sure your bottling bucket says off on it, or closed, or you're going to get a big mess and you're going to waste it.
Maybe set this underneath like that. Drop it in. Maybe you can set it behind it or something. I don't know. Yeah, there we go.
And then the short hose coming out of your pump goes on the inlet side of your filter. And then our last hose has got a wire in here.
Yes.
And the wire is important because we're eventually going to go all the way down into the sediment so we don't waste a drop of this wine. When you filter, you usually get about an extra 2 bottles versus having sediment that you're trying to be careful on. It's got an anti-yeast sediment tip on here that we just put on here, but this wire will allow us to curl it, especially on a dark red wine like this. It's going to allow us to curl it so that we can see where we're at. So we're going to start halfway up in the carboy, and then we're going to eventually move it all the way down to the bottom so we don't waste anything.
So you're actually going to draw it from here, and then we're going to draw it as it further moves down.
Okay.
Then you can just curl it in, right?
Yep, so I've got a curl. See how we can see that tip right there? So we're going to start halfway in. Now, if you're going to keep your wine longer than a year, it's a good idea to add a little extra sulfite in there. A quarter teaspoon will take you up to about 2/3 of what commercial wine is. Our wine isn't meant to sell there for 5 to 10 years. Usually at a year to 2 years, it's going to hit its peak, and we like to drink it when it's at that peak. But if you don't put a little extra sulfite, it's only going to stay fresh for about a year. So we're going to put an extra quarter teaspoon of sulfite in here, and a glass of water, half a cup of warm, just room temperature water is fine. And then we're going to put that in the bottom of our bucket, and what that also is going to do is, as the wine gets filtered in there, the sulfite will protect it from oxygen. Like I said, oxygen is our enemy right now. We don't want to get too much air in there.
And the sulfite will actually sit on the top also, won't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'll form a skin. It's microscopic, obviously, but it'll form a little layer on top of that. You know, the ancient Romans used to use olive oil as a technique because the oil would float on the top of the wine, and they would use that as an antioxidant technique. But this works significantly better.
Okay. So there she's priming. All right.
You see how slow it goes. This is not going to be a process that's going to work too fast. You want this to do its job, and it has to pass through.
There we go. So as it's filtering, we're going to move as we get the level down, we're going to move this tip further and further down, and then eventually we're going to tip the carboy.
Yeah.
And we're going to get every bit of it.
We got those things nice and tight too, because there's not really too much coming out the bottom either.
Yep.
That's what we want.
And you always want to drink a little bit of wine while you're making wine, so Bacchus and Dionysius will bless it. Salud. Okay, so we're getting down towards the bottom. We still have a little bit to go here. So we're getting ready. We're going to start tipping the carboy. Now, the thing to be careful about is you don't want to shake it up when you're tipping it.
Yeah.
And so if you use your hand at the bottom to brace it and just bring it nice and slow, and you actually want to bring the hose up a little bit because the sludge is, the lees, the sediment on the bottom is going to come down towards where your tip is.
Yeah, it's best to avoid any abrupt motions at this point in the process because the sediment that's down there is pretty light, and if you move it, it's going to kick it up and it's going to get filtered out.
And we still want to get every last drop in here.
And this carboy has very little sediment in it, but still, if you got more, it's even more important to do that. As soon as you hear that bubble noise, that means you're pulling air, so you want to push that hose down in there. But this is how you're going to get the most out of it. You can see that. That bucket's starting to get a little frothy at the top, so we're pulling a little air.
Yeah, we're pulling too much air, and our filter pads are clogged. All right.
Yeah, often that little bit at the bottom, it's worth sacrificing, because what happens is there is sediment in there, no matter what you're going to do, and it might block up your filter pads a little bit also.
Exactly. But we're going to get a full 30 bottles out of this batch by filtering. When you filter, you're going to get an extra bottle or two out of each batch. But that's the filtration process.
Cheers.
Salud.
Salud.